Right, we're going to talk through the respiratory system today. So we're looking at your lungs. Okay, there are some exam questions at the end. The last two exam papers. So if you want to skip straight to them, you can skip straight to them. Right, the respiratory system. So we're looking at all your lungs and how we actually breathe air into the body. Now, what the exams will want you to do is be able to describe the air goes into the nasal cavity. Now, one of the questions in the exam papers put where do you breathe air in? Okay, and one of the options was the mouth. Now they marked that wrong. They want you to say the nose. They want you to say the nasal cavity. So that is one of the key parts there. So make sure we always start it off by going that's where we breathe our air in. Okay, so we breathe it in through your nose, through your nasal cavity. You then breathe it in through your trachea. So it goes down the windpipe here. Okay, this then splits in the bronchi there and there. Then it goes into the side ones, which are all these spouting off here, which are your bronchioles. Okay. Now at the end of these bronchioles, it has tiny little air sacs on each one, which are your alveoli. Okay. So you need to learn that we breathe in through the nasal cavity, down the trachea, into the bronchi, into the bronchioli, into the alveoli, and that's where gaseous exchange takes place. You need to be able to say it as clear as that, so when you get a question, by knowing all the stages, the question then becomes very easy. Okay, so we've got it down the side here as well, which you can read through as well. Now, when we take in, so breathing is a term given to the process of taking air in and out of the lungs. Okay, inhalation and exhalation, they're two words they will use, okay, to try and confuse you. So this is quite simply breathing in, and this is quite simply is breathing out. Okay, now if you look here, we'll talk about it in a little bit as well. If you look here, this is the diaphragm. Okay, and that there is a diaphragm there. If you look at this point here, the two positions of the diaphragm, as you breathe in, the diaphragm moves down. Okay, it moves down in order to create more space in your lungs. Okay, in order for us to breathe out, the diaphragm moves up in order to make our lungs smaller, which forces the air out. Okay, one of the key terms here is this intercostal muscles. Now, the intercostal muscles are actually the muscles in between each section of the rib cage. So every section here is your intercostal muscles. Now, those muscles, same, contract and relax in order to move the ribs up and to move them down. So when we talk about this, one, you need to know the air, how air moves in through the nasal cavity and down into the alveoli to form gaseous exchange. At the same time, you need to know about the intercostal muscles and you need to know about the diaphragm. So, two important structures for breathing are the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, what you've just said. The diaphragm is a sheet of muscle that separates the chest cavity from the rest of the body. The intercostal muscles are found between the ribs and they control the ribs movement. Inspiration is breathing in. The diaphragm contracts and moves downwards. The intercostal muscles contract and move the ribs upwards and outwards. This increases the size of the chest and decreases the air pressure inside, which sucks the air into the lungs. Expiration, breathing out. The diaphragm relaxes and moves back to its dome shape. The intercostal muscles relax, so the ribs move inwards and downwards under the weight. This decreases the size of the chest and increases the air in the chest, and the air is forced out of the lungs. Now, gaseous exchange. A gaseous exchange is just a diffusion of the oxygen into the bloodstream as well as the waste products out of the bloodstream, which we breathe out. Now, they could give you this number here, 21. That's very important because that's the amount of oxygen as a percentage we breathe in. Okay, so we need to know 21%. At the same time, our body isn't particularly very good at using our oxygen, and really we breathe out sort of 19%. So we're not using very much oxygen at all. So when we actually get the figures of how much we breathe in and breathe out, we breathe in 21%, we're breathing out 19%. So we're looking at those figures there as well, which means pretty much 79% is nitrogen that we breathe in. Now you can read through this. Now, in our next picture here, you can actually see as the blood, and this is blue if you look, deoxygenated blood. There is no oxygen here. Now, the waste products is our CO2. Okay, now that passes through the capillaries, because capillaries are covered, alveoli covered in capillaries. Now, one of the things is capillaries around the alveoli are only one cell thick. So we need to remember that. Only one cell, okay, thick. So we need to remember that as well. Okay, so as the deoxygenated blood moves through the alveoli, it passes through the cell wall into the alveoli. So we now have CO2 in the alveoli, and we breathe out, and the CO2 is breathed out of the body. Now, as we breathe in, this is the O2, this is our oxygen, passes through the walls, which are one cell thick, and it makes our red blood cells now full of oxygen. Okay, now that goes back to the lungs, that goes back to our heart, which then pumps it around the body. So this whole process here is called gaseous exchange. Right, key terms: breathing rate, tidal volume, minute ventilation. Now you could get a 1 mark question here on what is breathing rate, what is tidal volume, what is minute ventilation. Now by learning these definitions, they are very, very easy 1 mark questions, but at the same time, if you don't learn the definitions and it comes up, you are throwing away easy marks. We can quite happily read this. We assess the performance of the respiration system by measuring how much air is inspired, so breathed in, and expired, breathed out, each minute. This is called minute ventilation. To calculate minute ventilation, we also need to know about the breathing rate and tidal volume. So breathing rate or frequency is the number of breaths taken in 1 minute. So how many breaths we take in 1 minute is your breathing rate. And it says the average is 12 to 15 breaths a minute. Now our tidal volume is the amount of air inspired, breathed in, expired, breathed out in 1 normal breath. The average resting tidal volume is approximately 500 millilitres. You don't really need to know that, but it's important that tidal volume and normal breath, and our 1 normal breath is very important. Now, by minute ventilation is the amount or volume of air inspired or expired in 1 minute, and can be calculated by multiplying tidal volume or breathing rate. The average resting tidal volume is 500 millilitres, and the average resting is 15. So the average resting VE is 750 millilitres, or approximately 7.5 litres per minute. Okay, during sport and physical activity, tidal volume and therefore VE all increase. That's the key. If anyone says anything about respiratory system, all of these increase while doing exercise because we need more oxygen. Right, we've now got a list of exam questions, and you can see there you need to pay close attention to the graph. It is not self-explanatory. You need to start thinking why their heart rate stays the same. Why does it go up so quickly? Why does it come down so quickly? Okay, and obviously the question here is that because you can't quite see it, the top person is A, second person is B. Now really have a think of those graphs before answering the questions, yeah, and work out which is the fitter person. Right, so you can pause this video now and work through. Last question here, if you can see it as well. It's very simple, what we talked about earlier. Have a look, because people got this wrong because they chose where we breathe the air in the wrong place. So we talked about this right at the start of the PowerPoint. So pause it, have a go. Good luck.